What's going on, everybody? Stop playing this music and everything now. Hello and welcome to Talkin Yanks, Sharp Stats episode. My name is Jimmy. I got Jake here and Katie, the queen of stats, getting you smart, sharp. Is joining us as always. We will be talking about Chad Green, about Gleyber's defense, about the Gardner and Talkin conversation. We'll be discussing it in logical, rational, scientific, mathematical ways. Katie, how you doing?
I am doing great, guys. Fired up, ready for another day of baseball. We're recording this on Wednesday this week, so a little bit of a different spin, but it's all good.
That damn Friday, or that damn Red Sox wraparound series really screwed it up a little bit. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. People listening tomorrow are either going to be quite grumpy Yankee fans or Yankee fans excited to try to win the series against Tampa tomorrow. So we'll see what side of bed the Yankees let fans wake up on tomorrow. Excited to talk Chad Green, the Goose. We try to give him as much love as we possibly can because he's honestly been fantastic, and he's found another level this year with a noticeable wipeout curveball. So I don't know, are we there? Did I just intro it?
We can
what do we need to do?
Because I'm interested in the curveball, because according to Statcast, he's still not throwing one, but his slider has more depth and movement. But now I'm stepping all over Katie's toes here with the Chad Green stuff. Katie, how are you? Did you enjoy the Red Sox series? And then Chad Green, tell us how good he is.
Good. Enjoy is not the word I would use to describe the Red Sox series, and Chad Green is amazing. But
okay.
Bases covered. The Red Sox series. I mean, you guys kind of summed it up pretty perfectly in your recap. It was just, it's pathetic. I mean, it's really sad. It's sad to see because it's been such a great rivalry over the past so many years, and now it's just like, I mean, they're tanking. There's no way around it. So hopefully we'll have better times ahead in the rivalry, but that's fine with me if we get 4 wins out of it.
I agree with that. Early agree.
All right. So let's dig into Chad Green right now. First of all, let's just lay out his stats. This is as we're recording it on Wednesday. So, I mean, it's just pretty remarkable what he's done so far. It's 44 batters faced, so think about that. 17 strikeouts. He's given up 2 hits, 1 run, and 4 walks only to those 44 batters, and one of those was actually intentional. And if you're into kind of some weird, funky stats, his ERA plus, which kind of puts it onto a league average and normalizes it, is 618. So if you're curious, 100 is league average. So he's at about 618. I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous. Small sample size, but just to kind of put into perspective how good he's doing this season.
600% better than your peers is pretty...
Exactly, yeah.
A decent start.
Yeah, like a good Mariano season would probably... He got into the 200s. Which just showed for an entire season, which just showed how ridiculous he is. So, but anyways, and then if you look at his Statcast stats, we're just his straight Statcast stats, his expected stuff, that I've mentioned before. It matches up exactly with what he's doing. It's an expected batting average of 170, a 264 expected slugging. He's got a hard hit rate of 26%. Where league average is about 36%. And the thing that I really like is he's got a sweet spot rate, which I think we've introduced that before on the show. It's basically the percentage of pitches, or this time pitches or batted balls. It's actually batted balls that are hit with a launch angle between 8 and 32 degrees. So that's kind of like the ideal launch angle. So that's why it's called the sweet spot rate. So his rate for batted balls is 26%, and the league average is about 40. So basically, guys just either they're missing or they're just not hitting it. Which I mean, obviously passes the smell test because we can see that every time he goes out there and pitches.
Yeah.
So basically the numbers are really good, and all of the expected stats back up those numbers in terms of launch angle, velocity, those types of things, which is also really encouraging. So then the next kind of thing that I definitely, the heart of this is what I want to talk about is that this year he actually switched his breaking pitch from a slider to a curve. And Statcast actually they are now classifying it as a curveball.
That's what I checked. They like 2 days ago they weren't, because I was telling Jake they must be behind, and they officially changed his secondary pitch to a curveball.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I mean that happens, when you introduce a new pitch like that. So that's why it's always important to kind of get as much data as possible. But anyways, so I think what this really does is this is actually a better pitch for him than a slider, and there's a couple reasons. Anybody who's played baseball at least knows that fastball and curveballs are kind of the ideal combination if you're going to have just two pitches because of the way that they complement each other. So I'm going to go into a little bit of some sort of nerdy pitch stuff here, but just bear with me. So just in terms of his curveball, it's not really one of those like wowie curveballs that you see like really bendy or, lots of movement or anything like that, or really slow. It's actually pretty average. It's a little bit below average in terms of the movement, and the speed is above average. But what it does is it really it complements his fastball really extremely well. And there's two reasons for that, why it's better than the slider. First of all,
Give me tunneling.
Hey, we're getting there. We're going to the tunnel.
Teaser.
Calm down.
Sorry.
So first of all, it's getting a bigger vertical drop differential than the fastball and the slider were. It's about, I think it's about 4 inches more. Actually it's about 10 inches more vertical differential.
Whoa.
So that helps a lot. And then it's slower. So it's a slower pitch than the fastball. So he's now got about 11, 12 mile per hour differential, rather with the slider is more in like the 8 to 9 range. So those are two key things if you're going to have two pitches, is to get a bigger movement differential between the pitches and a bigger velocity differential. So that's what's happening there when you switch to the curveball. The other way that it really helps is what's called kind of a spin mirroring and tunneling. So these are two really interesting concepts. So basically what happens is he releases those two pitches from exactly the same release point, vertical and horizontal, like literally exactly the same release point if you look at it, if you look at the numbers. But where they end up at the plate, and basically after that decision point, is they're much farther apart when they end up at the plate. So the curveball is ending up about 6 inches more, break to the left-hand batter's side, and is dropping about 12 inches more than the fastball. So if you kind of think about it like a tunnel, they're the same pitch when you release and basically up until the decision point, and then right before the plate, they kind of diverge. So that's the concept of tunneling, what Jake was talking about. The other concept that I kind of want to introduce is what's called spin mirroring. And this is really interesting because it's the way that the baseball is actually rotating on its axis. And if you kind of just think about the hands of a clock, that's the way you look at it. And if you think about a fastball, that's thrown basically over the top with all backspin, right? So the ball, that's why you get that rise on the fastball. A curveball is basically the opposite. It's thrown with a ton of topspin, and that's why you get a drop on a curveball, relative to the path.
And I think what might familiarize some of the people, if you're watching the broadcast, normally if they're talking about a breaking ball, they'll talk about the dot that shows up on the ball and how the tight dot versus the loose dot between throwing a good one. And I'm fascinated by this because I've always been curious because you just said they are opposites. So I've always wondered if hitters can consciously think about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I honestly don't have any experience with that because the highest level that I played was right up until through middle school. So guys weren't throwing these nasty curves or whatever. But the concept is incredibly interesting because so the ideal way would then to be have like kind of a perfect spin mirroring, so that the fastball has a perfect, top backspin, and then the curveball has the perfect topspin, so that the axis basically mirror each other. So you want to kind of get the biggest differential between the spin axis between your two pitches. And if you look at what Chad Green has, is he actually almost has that perfect 180 degree differential. It's about, so his fastball is on a spin axis of 200 degrees. If you think about kind of like a ball, a clock. And then his curveball is at about 40 degrees. So that's what, 160 degree differential, which is actually, that's almost ideal. A lot of guys really are probably only in like the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s if they're elite with their pitches. So, I mean, I think this is going to be a really good thing for him, and it's not only going. I mean, the curveball probably isn't going to be fantastic, and it's not going to get lots of strikeouts or whatever. But it's actually made his fastball a lot better. If you look at his fastball, he's thrown 144 fastballs, and he's gotten 0 hits and 13 strikeouts with those fastballs and a 40% swing and miss rate. So it's made even though his curveball, he throws it, probably about 20% of the time right now, it's actually made his fastball even better because of those, kind of those concepts that I just talked about. So, I mean, I'm really excited for what this pitch can do for him.
I was going to bring up that fun fact, Katie, but obviously you have it before me. You have all the stats. Chad hasn't given up a hit on his fastball yet. Very cool. Do you know who got the 2 hits off of him, Jake? If Jake could guess the 2 guys that got hits off Chad this season, he won't get a bucket of water dumped on his head tomorrow.
My word. Tough stakes.
I'll give you a hint. Both of them play in an East division.
Okay. I was thinking that could be the lean here.
AL East.
Give me...
One's a lefty, one's a righty.
Hanser Alberto.
It's one of his teammates, but not him.
Santander?
No.
Did he get him? I don't know.
Pat Valaika and Verdugo.
Valaika
and both on kind of curveballs, hanging curves, like middle, bad curves. I think it's crazy he hasn't given up a hit on a fastball yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen, I think, with this curveball because he doesn't have the command of it. Obviously, he's just started throwing it, so he's not going to have the command of a guy who, like a Trevor Bauer or something like that throws, has been throwing it his entire life.
And Verdugo, he got a real hit. Valaika's hit is a not seeing eye single, but it's like a 10 hopper.
Yeah, Tyler Wade fielded it. If it wasn't someone named Pat Valaika, a shift would have been on, and that would have been an out.
Yeah, it's not really like, he got Chad.
Yeah.
It 10 hopped up the middle. So as far as I'm concerned, Chad's given up 1 legit hit.
And
that's incredible.
The couple things that jump out, like you're saying, the fastball. I mean, there's so many guys in this league that make a living off of finding the fastball or hunting the fastball. And if you do that against Chad, you still don't really have a shot, and that's what he's had in the past. The curveball and the fastball, like you're saying, with more drop and the speed difference, I felt like there were at-bats last year when you'd see Chad go into a 6, 7, 8 pitch at bat, and the guy could just almost foul off the slider or foul off the fastball. There kind of wasn't enough speed change that they were coming in, and those were your kind of, Chad doesn't have the slower curveball he can go to hopefully get him out of this situation. And then the last one that I'll stumble into is I think it's going to be interesting to follow kind of Chad Green's pitch sequencing a little bit, just because it's almost like he doesn't. I'm trying to picture in a playoff situation everything we just said about the curveball and not having the same confidence as the fastball. It almost feels like the pitching backwards or Chad Green's not going to want to put a curveball over the plate because that has a much better chance of getting touched up than his fastball. So that's, I don't know, a couple things I'll be watching going forward.
Yeah, and I think that the more confidence he gets with the pitch, he'll be able to sequence it better. He'll throw that first pitch curveball, and he won't hesitate. And I think that can be one of the most effective weapons for a reliever, particularly when you can kind of come in there and just drop that first pitch curveball and be like, hey, this is what I got. Then try to hit my fastball. And the ability to kind of change eye levels is going to be really important for him. I think, with this new pitch especially.
I'd like, maybe we'll ask our friend Lindsay Adler to ask Chad, if it hasn't been asked. I wonder if this curveball is truly a new pitch, or if he's just throwing the slider with a little more depth. I wonder if it's like a completely new grip, completely new thought process. Or is it just that's what you think it is? Do the numbers suggest that, or because some people say they take a little off and they get a little more sweep to it. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting. It's got to be a new grip, just because of the difference in the speed and actually in the drop. So I think it's definitely a new grip. And I would just be curious to kind of see his process of how he learned it. I think I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff.
Same, because it's a risky thing.
It's always cool. Yeah, I mean, but I think it was a little bit less risky for him, maybe because his slider really wasn't good either. It got a little bit better at the end of last year, but I mean, he's always been such a fastball heavy guy, and his fastball is tremendous. But I think his curve is going to make his fastball even better, like I said before.
And we saw him go to a change last year at some points as well. Or is that in 18? I forget.
Yeah, they have him with a few splitters last year. I mean, it's a classification thing too, so
yeah,
you never know.
I wonder when we talked to Canely, he joked, or he was kind of serious about all the relievers were working on knuckle curves. I wonder if that's a Matt Blake thing, or if it is the same thing. And the other just weird thing, again, digging into my own brain, Zach Britton is obviously a very different pitcher than Chad, lefties, but they both rely heavily on one pitch. And Zach Britton has worked in the slider more, / curveball, slurve, whatever it is. I don't know. I wonder if there's fun conversations to be had between those two.
Maybe they don't talk at all.
Maybe they're not close friends.
Speaking of bad news, the next subject we have on the show is Gleyber Torres' defense. Katie, there's been a lot of noise. My brain has been going this way. We're just starting to wonder, can Gleyber play Major League shortstop? Is that where his future is? He came up as a shortstop. He played a lot of shortstop last year when Didi was out. How's he rate out? The eye test, you have the lazy errors, the bad errors on regular plays, the throwing errors, but, I was trying to go into my memory bank. We talked about this last episode. I can't really recall too many great plays by Gleyber at short. So I don't know what defensive metrics we really look at, because I know that with Urshela, we don't fully trust them. I'll just give it to you. What do you have for us on Gleyber's defense at short?
Yeah. So I think you kind of really, what the eye test says actually kind of is backed up with a lot of the metrics that we have out there. And one thing that I do want to point out is that looking at defensive metrics for just this season is probably not the best idea, just because right now we are in such a small sample size. And when you think about it, with defense, it's even smaller of a sample size, because the amount of plays that you can actually kind of determine whether a guy is good or not is just so few at this point in the season. I mean, in fact, Statcast, the Statcast website doesn't even have their infield defensive metrics on the website yet, because there just isn't enough of a sample.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Some of the other websites are, showing their defensive run saved, I think is actually on Fangraphs and some other stuff. But yeah, so excuse me. One of the things, so I will just I'm going to probably rely a lot on last year's stuff. But I think that we can kind of tell that not much has changed just from the eye test. So the point that you make out is really good about him not really making any spectacular plays. And he's okay, I think, with the absolute. So what the numbers say is that he's he's basically league average and does what everybody else does on the absolute, 100%, these are the 100% success plays. So he's got what is called a 98% success rate on plays that are basically 100% likely or above 90% likely to make, which is kind of what the major league average is. If you look at like a Lindor, if you look at a Didi, those are the two guys kind of I'm going to be comparing, so we can do some comparisons. Those guys are both in that same range for the, everyday plays.
That's if you're the average human playing shortstop, 98% is kind of the clip.
Yeah. There's going to be guys that have 100% on those.
Right.
But 98% is kind of what everybody does.
Okay.
Where Gleyber really struggles is in these plays that are considered 40 to 90% likely to make. And this is data, like when I say it's 40 to 90% likely, this is like based on, historical data of this ball in this space, this place, at this batted ball speed, those types of things. It doesn't actually have anything to do with positioning, the pre-position of the player. So this is this data that I'm just talking about right now. So that's kind of one thing to think about, but the numbers are just so striking. So on these plays that have like a 40 to 90% likelihood, Gleyber has converted over the last year, he converted 33% of those plays, 33%. So just remember that number. So if you could take a look at Didi, even last year when, you have to admit, he was not good last year in the field. He didn't look very good. He looked a little bit uncomfortable with his arm. But he converted actually 56% of those. And if you go back to 2018, he had a 71% conversion rate on those same plays. And then for even more comparison's sake, if you look at a Lindor, who has a very good defensive reputation, he converts about 75% of those plays. So Gleyber here was at 33% last year. And that is really the place where he struggles because like I said, the plays that are above 90% likely, he's about the same. And if you look at plays with like a less than 40% chance, it's just most people are going to struggle. And, there's a lot fewer of those. So expect
Lindor converts 75% of plays that they say only 40% of people should be making?
But no, it's between 40 and 90%. So it's kind of 40, like an even shot or about,
gotcha. I thought you were saying between 0 and 40 and Lindor made 75.
Or about more than likely. But so,
and just
that's
to put a little more,
what you were pointing out exactly with the eye test. He just really struggles in these kind of plays that are kind of 50-50 or maybe, 2/3 likely to get, but he just can't convert those. So that's just data from last year. Obviously, they don't have the data from this year. But that is kind of why and this is all at shortstop. Like I said, I didn't look at his second base numbers. So that's one data point out there. The other data point that I want to look at is the Statcast data. And we talked about that. They don't even have it for this year yet. But they do have it for last year. And what the Statcast data does, which I really like, is that it actually doesn't just look at the lineup position of where the guy was in the lineup, but it also looks at where he is actually positioned on the field. So that's really helpful for shifts, right? So a lot of times you saw, even if Gleyber was a second baseman, he was maybe even playing in the shortstop hole. Or if he was a shortstop, he was playing in the second base hole. So when you look at what he did last year, there was actually some kind of optimism that he might be good at shortstop this year, because where he really struggled was when he was positioned in the second base position, whether he was listed as a shortstop or a second baseman. He was actually 5 outs below average. So they have like a rating system of how many outs are above or below average you are in terms of the plays that you make. And he was 5 outs below average when he was in the field positioned as a second baseman. And he was about league average. He was a 0 outs above average when he was in the shortstop position on the field. So like those numbers actually gave me a little bit of optimism this year that he would be pretty competent, at least at shortstop. But obviously, we've seen the eye test this year and it hasn't worked out yet. And the numbers last year said that he really struggled going to his backhand side, which that's pretty typical, I would think, for a fielder, for a shortstop, where he did excel going to his glove hand side. So
I think that even showed at second base. When I picture him making good plays at second base, a lot of him going to his left towards first in that hole, then going up the middle. That's just my recollection right now. Could be wrong, but that's those are the plays I think if it was going to his left.
That's the eye test, and it kind of backs it up with the numbers. So I think what we've seen so far, and I think the most glaring errors have been those throwing errors, right? He has 4 throwing errors already all this season. Last year, though, it was still a problem. I mean, this is not really anything new. Last year, he had 6 throwing errors, and he was some of the defensive metrics actually rate you based on your throwing, so a run saved type of thing based on your throwing, and he was in the black. He was in the negatives for that last year when he was at shortstop, and he was even worse when he was at second base in terms of the throwing. So obviously don't have the numbers yet for this year, but I think it's going to be negative whenever they do come out, because you can see he's just not really comfortable, and I don't know if it's a mental thing, but that's kind of the most glaring things, and when you see those errors, those are really errors that he's making, and a lot of times people can say, oh, errors are subjective, but I think we can see with the eye test that his throwing is probably the biggest area where he is struggling right now this year.
He had Tommy John, right?
Yes.
Was that on his throwing arm? It was his non-throwing arm. Okay, that's what I thought, because I was remembering that, but I wanted to make sure that you can't really correlate that. It's weird. I mean, again, the couch eye test, and I don't think there's analytics to confirm it, but it looks like he's trying to be a little too Showtime. It looks like he's Katie, you probably heard us mention it on the last broadcast, but he does kind of the stuff you do in Little League, because you saw Jeter do it on TV, and you do some funky footsteps, and then you sidearm it to first, and then the coach pulls you over and says, hey, don't do that. It seems like a lot of the throwing errors are those types, and it's frustrating, and when I click on the Baseball Reference and I see age 23, I'm hopeful there can still be growth there, that he can look back. But I don't know. I mean, is it all in Gleyber's hands at this point? Is it,
I think one thing that I do want to kind of point out is that I think this is a fixable problem, and the reason why I think that it is because. If you look at Fernando Tatis Jr., we obviously know he's pretty much an amazing shortstop already this year. He's done some incredible things. And if you look at his defense last year, he had 14 throwing errors, which was obviously the most among all shortstops.
And that was 84 games.
It was the one big knock on his play last year was his defense and how much he struggled throwing. And what he did is this offseason, he went to work, and he just worked a ton on his defense and a ton specifically on his throwing. And if you look at this year, he has 0. And he is graded out as basically an average to above average defender so far this year. And that was just one offseason of work that he did. So that is what kind of gives me a little bit of optimism and a little bit of hope that Gleyber can fix this. I mean, he's 23 years old. Fernando Tatis is 20, 21 years old. So they're both incredibly young. And I think, it seems like it is a fixable problem, this throwing thing. And he definitely, he has the athleticism. We can see that. His range is good. So I don't think that that's ever going to be the problem. But right now, I think he does need like an off season to work on this. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And you kind of hope as a fan he takes pride in it, and you hope for the rest of this season that, when the ground balls matter, this was kind of the Gio Urshela argument for a while that I wouldn't say it was straw man-ish, but when you need a play, you got to make it. Like everyone, like we talked about with that 98%, everyone is human and is going to make some errors. There's times when you kind of can't in baseball, especially as the shortstop, especially as the guy. And it's something that every Yankee fan is watching right now. And if if Luke Voit didn't make a pick to, I think it was the end of the Red Sox series, we were going to be having a real bad time. So, and I think he had one throw yesterday that wasn't too pretty. So it's, I mean, the yellow flag is definitely up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But it's also, like, someone in the chat said need a psychologist, and it's like a lot of headspace.
Yeah.
It seems a lot of headspace, but we'll see. All right.
And, I mean, this is first year with Didi fully out of the picture. I mean, he was hurt last year.
And the bat slumped for a while, and you wonder how much that carries onto the field with him. And it does feel like you get one bad throw, you're going to get another.
Yeah.
A home run hitters hit him in bunches. Feels like Gleyber's throws come in bunches, so.
And Didi's level you'd think would be attainable. Didi was good. Didi seems a little more athletic than Gleyber. And I do want to say this just for a point of reference. I mean, Lindor, his defensive stuff was better than I thought. I didn't know Lindor won a platinum glove. I would have lost that bet. And he's got 2 gold gloves. So he's definitely elite. I didn't fully realize that. So Gleyber, you're young, and I like hearing Katie Sharp say the word correctable. That's good.
That is good. All right. Next up, stat of the week. Katie, what do you got for us? Stat of the week, the sharpest stat.
All right, this one is in honor of Jomboy here, and his fascination with Luke Voit in games when he doesn't start the previous game. So this is the Luke Voit, Mike Ford conversation, right?
I love it. Okay.
All right, here we go. Okay, so I knew you'd like this. Butter knife. This is the ultimate butter knife. Here we go. So I just looked at this season just because I didn't feel like, kind of counting up everything from last year and whatever. But this season, so there's been 4 games in which Luke Voit did not start the game before. That's the criteria that I'm using. And in those 4 games, he is 8 for 14, 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, and only 2 strikeouts. And it's better. He has at least 2 hits in every game and a home run in 3 of those 4 games. So there you go.
Sometimes this brain of mine, I was onto that one pretty quick. That dude doesn't like being sit. He doesn't like being sat. That's awesome. Thank you for putting stats to my brain.
Yeah.
You got it.
That's some playoffs. I think that might have to be some playoff voodoo stuff. Like if you've got, say the Yankees have 3 wins going into a game 6, maybe you sit Voit for the game 6 just in case you need him for the game 7, so you're getting the lights out performance. I don't know. That's spooky.
You run a risk there.
You run a risk.
I mean, this is the ultimate small sample. I don't know if you want to mess with it, but
facts are facts.
Right now, that's the facts.
Facts.
And I do think it's because he's pissed.
Yeah.
That is awesome. All right, thank you for digging that up. Well, we're going to get going before the technology wrestles us anymore. Katie, thank you as always for making us smarter Yankee fans. We need more smart fans out there. So, not that worried about Gleyber. I'm worried about Gleyber.
Yeah.
And Chad's the best ever.
Chad's the best. Tweet at KT Sharp, the queen of stats. Thank her. And Katie, as Jimmy hinted at, a personal thank you from us for going into our stupid brain well and finding the Luke Voit the day after stat. That's the goods.
Love it. Anytime, guys.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one. Thank you, guys. We will see you next time on Talkin' Yanks, recapping this series against the Rays. Go Yanks. Tell them, Grams.
Go Yankees.